to thicken paint and to create more of an impasto brushed effect that's partly three-dimensional, I could add some thickener to the paint. That can be in the form of whiting, which is a finely ground chalk, and it's supplied as an art material. So the difference between something like this material, whiting, and polyfiller or filler is that this material, this dusty material, doesn't have any lime with it. So if it was mixed with water, it wouldn't bind. And in fact, when it would dry, it would simply fall apart again. So in order to mix this with paint, you need some sort of binder like Liquin or oil, linseed oil, but linseed oil would be quite slow to dry. But any sort of oil or alkyd medium could be added with water-soluble oils. So if I add a little bit of Liquin original to this amount of whiting, and then I'm going to use a brush to mix. You can see that it's a bit reluctant to mix, but it will combine to make a paste. The advantage of making your own bulking agent like this, medium, is that you can determine how viscous it is. So that in turn determines how three-dimensional or how high build the mixture is. So you can see what I'm making here is quite heavy. There's a lot of chalk, whiting, which probably should have been sieved before using. That's what they would do with gesso, making gesso the traditional way. Or maybe this would be better with a palette knife. So a substitute for whiting that you could find in the bathroom cabinet could be talcum powder. Talcum powder is mostly finely ground chalk, probably more finely ground even than for whiting. The only difference is it has a bit of a perfume in it. So that's now mixed together, and I'm hoping that's clear on screen that it's quite three-dimensional. If I brush into that, when I brush with a whole bristle Filbert brush, I'm getting these rather nice textural marks, similar to how flake white would have appeared in the past. And so that can be mixed with a colour, say blue. The whiting does have some element of colour lightening in it, so it's not quite as neutral as Liquin Oleopasto, which is completely clear and doesn't have any effect on the colour at all. So if I mix a blue, two blues mixed together, and adding more bulking agents, you can see that does make it paler. A little bit of white. I'm interested in that 3D element, 3D quality. Let's try a little bit of phthalo blue. So I'm aiming to create this sort of sea blue colour in the painting by Potast. And that's quite a vivid blue. Let's try a bit more. So I am going to use some Liquin Oleopasto, which is more transparent. So I've got this mixture of Whiting, Liquin Original and oil paint. I'll put that to one side for a minute. Look at the painting that I started. So this is dry today, and if I zoom into one section of this, what would like to try and pick up on is the textural description and expression that can be brought to this through partly 3D brushwork. So I'm just deliberately trying to use the brush a bit like a knife to build up thicknesses of paint with distinctive brushwork. So I'm leaving the brushwork, brush strokes, which could be blended away. That's one of the easiest things to do in oil paint. I'm trying to leave those marks, those individual marks, where the light is shining on the water here. So Liquin will dry quite quickly. It can start to go tacky within a couple of hours. I'm getting too warm a blue with this. Let's try another blue. The colours in the blue of the water are a mixture of phthalo and Ultramarine, or even ceruleum. So that's a colder one. It's a bit of white paint, and then some of the whiting mixture, a little bit of the. You can see that does have a sort of stand-up quality. That's where the texture of the mark will remain. So if I lay that on top, sort of very gently, using the brush at a shallow angle, I really just want the paint to stick to the surface and not blend it too much. So it seems a little bluer next to the beach. Yeah, talcum powder and linseed oil, or talcum powder and alkyd medium, or the Artisan medium, which is a sort of gloopy material. That could work. Also Artisan Impasto medium and the brush. I'm hoping those marks stand up more. See that partly 3D quality, capturing the light with the marks. And one thing about this partly 3D quality is it does add a layer of expression to a painting. It can't be mistaken for anything else. It can't be mistaken for anything but an original painting. I'm just putting on more colour and more paint. So that's the warmer blue, which has got ultramarine with it. And then I've got some colder blue, which I'll just use around the edge of the shoreline. This would be better done wet into wet. I'm just painting around this wave. Traditionally, with oil paint, you would develop the darker values, even the mid-tone values, and then bring light out of that. Let's zoom out a little bit. So those are quite vivid contrasting colours, contrasting tonally with the lighter wave, foaming wave, and also with the costumes, except for this girl. But the toddler is very very light against all this background colour. I'm using the edge of a Filbert brush to make slightly thinner three-dimensional marks. I keep having to go back to the palette and scooping up colour to so far I've just been using 2 brushes and 2 mixtures. Try and get a bit more of that 3D quality. It's a little bit darker there. Very light touch with the brush. You can see what I've done there is the way that catches the light. It's not like knife painting. It would be the same, obviously, with just more colour. This is a little more, even more bulk than a lot of colour you'd have to use to achieve the same effect. Generally, Whiting and Liquin is more economical than colour. Oh, that's slightly darker there. I'm holding the brush a long way back so as not to push down, and just patting the surface, literally patting the surface with the brush. And it's a very sticky, gloopy mixture. You can see I've got these 2 blues, the warm blue and the cold one at the opposite end of the palette. I like to try and make a sand colour with ochre, white and a bit of crimson and some of the bulking agent. A bit of blue in that. Put some pink back into it to compensate for the loss of warmth. You can see with Potash's paintings is that there are little patches of different colour. It's not the same colour everywhere. So in this area here next to the toddler, it's a fairly dark sandy colour which has got a little bit of pink in it. So it's not just one colour, so there's a tiny bit of pink getting into that. Put a bit more of the bulking agent. So where the sea meets the sand, that's a soft edge. I'm just blending that very lightly. Just put a little bit of light into that. More light, but not blend it too much. So I'm leaving the brush mark there. Some blue, a little touch of blue right next to the face. It's not quite the same sand colour, and there's a merging of the sand colour and the blue along the edge of the wave. See? Again, if I hold that up, that's what I was looking for, is this rich mark, quality of mark that sort of is frozen with the gesso and the bulking agent. So I try and work through the whole painting in this way, and then begin to build up, look at the light areas, and they would be painted. Obviously I've got to try and avoid, if I'm using white, I've got to try and avoid the other colours when picking up the bulking material. That's got some of it in it. I put a tiny bit of cad yellow pale into that white, just to give it a warmth. You see that also is transformed from the typical thin colour into something much more impasto, and I look to building this up on the figure. So there is something there already, there is thin colour there from before. I'd like to try and get the twist in the fabric, so sort of 3D quality of paint in the direction of the fabric. And using the edge as a clue to that direction. So although it appears sort of very casually painted, the edges of this figure, for instance, are quite precise. So if I hold that up with the camera, you can see the sort of marks that I'm trying to make that follow the direction of the fabric. And that has a warm blue shadow, so that's a little bit different. Blue against blue here, which is difficult to represent. I'm hoping the brush marks for the light area and for the shadow sort of work together to give a partly 3D look to the description of surface direction. So it shows the beginning of that process. This is before, the surface quality before the addition of the bulking material, and after. Something that's very hard to reproduce in a photograph. When you actually stand in front of a painting, you see it better. That's flat, and that has hopefully got more surface expression. Any areas of soft edges would be better painted wet into wet. So preserving these colours on different brushes. Just want to cut into this a little bit. So I'm hoping that's merged the reflection with the water more. It'll stay movable for a while. If you use linseed oil, much longer. A bit lighter there. So some 3D effects from a bulking agent and brushwork.